Bill C-18 continues to cause quite the stir. The bill forces companies such as Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, and Google to negotiate commercial deals and pay news publishers for their content. And of course, this bill has created a lot of havoc in the industry. Meta and Google vowing to block Canadian news. Governments saying they won't advertise on Meta and Google. And now the Provincial Communications Sector Council is calling on the federal government to halt all advertising purchases, and some levels of government have followed suit. We've seen an announcement this week from the federal government, the Quebec government, the Montreal municipal government here has also said they would stop running ads on Google and Facebook. Let's find out a little bit more from Nathalie Blais. She represents media workers for the SCFP-Quebec. This is a union that represents media workers. Nathalie, welcome to the program.
Hi. Thank you for inviting me.
Nathalie, listen, I've haven't talked about Bill C-18 that much on this show because I sort of feel that, our listeners, they care about the news, they love the news, they listen to us, but they don't care about how the big companies fight with each other and how the government fights with the big companies. They just want their news. Why don't you tell our listeners why Bill C-18 is so important and the battle over it is so important?
Well, to be very simple, to say it very simply, it's because the media is losing money. So all companies, well, mainly in TV, I must admit that I know this area better than all the other ones. Mm-hmm. But even in radio, it becomes to be tougher these days to get revenues. TV, radio, print, all those companies that are making the news your listeners like to hear or to read or to watch, they have to make money, and the only way they're getting that revenue is from ads, advertising that is bought by companies, governments, and other organizations. And since Facebook and Google have taken so much place in that area, we evaluate that they're getting 80% of all the advertising revenues in Canada. That's a lot of money. Facebook, it's evaluated that they're getting $2.9 billion a year in money from Canadian companies and governments. And that money is not flowing through our media. And it costs money to do the news, and it's paying people like our members and like you. You are working for the people, but you're paid by a private company, and that company needs money to run the news business. That's all.
We have seen some, recent developments. I know Quebecor, they announced for their TVA network that they wanted to cut back on some local broadcasts in the regions. We saw Bell, and of course Bell owns CJAD 800. They've applied to the CRTC for some cutbacks on hours of TV. And I'm just wondering, is the fear for the SCFP Quebec and for other people in this industry that trend, that there's a downward spiral and that trend continues here?
Yeah, sure. That's really a threat. And at the meantime, the government is trying to help. So you have also Bill C-11 that was passed this spring that's overhauling the Broadcasting Act to include in the regulation all the web giants like Netflix and Disney. And so C-11 plus C-18, those two bills are part of the scheme to try to help the media get back some revenue and a level playing field, because they're competing now with those multinationals that have gigantic means.
Well, how would you describe the attitude of the tech giants? So you look at Meta, you look at Google, and how they've handled this. How would you describe their attitude?
Well, they're just bullying. I mean, they're private companies. We're trying. Well, the country, the government is trying to put in place some conditions to preserve the democracy in two ways. The first one is to still having news produced here about what's happening in Canada, in all the communities of the country, not just in some big cities, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, for instance. We want to have news from everywhere in the country. And the other way they're hurting democracy is by refusing to abide by Canadian laws. Canada actually is a battlefield where Web giants have decided to oppose government's legitimacy in the face of the world. Next Tuesday, California will launch a parliamentary proceeding. The California bill would mandate Google and Facebook to pay monthly contributions to the media. So that's very different. And I think that what's happening here in Canada is to send a message outside of the country. And that's why we have to have a tough reaction. And we're really welcoming what the federal government, the Quebec government, and the cities in Quebec have decided to do so far. I read this morning that the Chamber of Commerce of Montreal is also jumping in. But we need to have more support from outside of Quebec.
Nathalie, let me just ask you this to wrap up. What do you say to someone who says, well, the best way to help the media would be to get out of the way and have less regulation? Because you mentioned Bill C-11 as well, right? So there are two big bills that have changed the way media is regulated and the tech giants are regulated in this country. What do you say to someone who says, you know what, get out of the way, not more regulation?
Well, I'm saying that's a big risk, because a lot of the news that we produce right now in Canada is protected by that regulation. So if we're losing it, we may lose something else. I'm not so sure that all media companies would continue to do local news, for instance. If there was not regulations, we intervene sometimes at the CRTC, and we generally think and say to the commissioners that we think that without their regulations, there would not be any local news in many areas in this country. So to get rid of the regulation, that's a big, big risk. So we ought to try it. It's not perfect, but let's try it and see if it's working out.
Nathalie Blais represents media workers at the SCFP-Quebec, the union. Nathalie, thank you so much for coming on the program this morning.
Thanks to you for having me.